Hey folks, Real Honesty with Jarmithlin. I'm Jarmithlin. This is a 20-year reflection on the main event of Starrcade 1997 that took place December 28th, 1997. Sting versus Hollywood Hogan with Bret Hart as a special guest referee, this big build and everything. And God, they fucked it up so bad. How could they fuck this up so goddamn bad? How did they fuck this goddamn build up so fucking bad? I was going to talk about the entire pay-per-view in this reflection show, but I decided to just focus on the main event because I covered the entire pay-per-view in my complete Starrcade history, where I talked about all the pay-per-views, ranking them from worst to best and everything. So I figured, okay, I'm just going to focus on the big part of it, because I did rant a bit about it on that particular episode when I talked about the 1997 edition. I don't remember exactly where I ranked it. I know it was a bit lower than some people might have expected, but part of that was because of this main event. And you got to go back and look at the history of it, and that's what I'm going to go back and do. Hulk Hogan signs with WCW in 1994. Sting had already been the stalwart of WCW, the franchise player and everything, even though Ric Flair was still there, and I mean, had only not been there for about, I would say, about a year and a half. Sting was the guy. It was their guy. Flair called him, their Ultimate Warrior, except he was 10 times better and he was a good guy on top of it. He's actually 100 times better because Ultimate Warrior couldn't wrestle his weight out of a paper bag, and I don't miss Warrior one bit. Sorry, that's my opinion. You guys can if you want. I just never cared for him. But Sting was the guy, blonde hair, surfer look and everything, surfer Sting. It really worked so well for him. Him and Hogan had never really had much of a tussle. They'd had a very brief clashes and this kind of stuff, and passing and stuff like that. But once Hogan started to go dark, and I'm not talking about the Dungeon of Doom stuff, but once he went dark at Bash at the Beach 1996, by that point Sting had stopped dyeing his hair and had started growing it out to be, his natural color and everything. So the idea was, okay, it was a bit of a different look for Sting, but it sort of worked and everything. I didn't really notice the change until somebody pointed out to me, and I was, I think it was about 14. No, I was about 15 when somebody pointed out to me. They go, Sting changed his hair, he's not bleaching anymore. And I look on the next episode of Nitro, because this was on a Monday at school. I go, oh yeah. Oh well, it is what it is. But from there, from the whole Hogan heel turn, Sting was involved in that match. And then the Fall Brawl, War Games cage match and everything, where the fourth guy for the Team NWO was going to be Sting. It was actually a fake Sting. And Oga, they thought it was all him because this fake Sting had attacked Luger the previous Nitro right before the pay-per-view. Or just, 6 days before the pay-per-view. Nobody on his team believed him. Luger, Flair, Arn, they didn't believe him. And fake Sting's out there. Crowd saying, we want Sting, we want Sting, we want Sting. Crowd just roars when Sting finally runs down to the ring for Team WCW, beats up the NWO, and takes them all out. Is that good enough for you right there? Does this and walks away. Next night, he addresses the camera, but he's facing away from the camera. Basically, they have the camera pointed from one side of the crowd into the ring. He's facing away and just talking. He won't even look at the camera. Way say WCW turns its back on me. I'm turning my back on everybody that turned their back on me. For those that stuck by me, I appreciate it. For those that didn't, you fans can stick it. And Sting then started wearing the black trench coat and the black and white face paint. People thought he was going to be NWO, but he wasn't. And he didn't wrestle after Fall Brawl. He did not wrestle till Starrcade 97. He had a few times where he would hit some moves, or he'd do some impactful stuff like descend from the rafters and everything and get somebody and take him back up like what he did with DDP. But other than that, didn't wrestle at all. Big build for this, because it was pretty much from Hogan's heel turn they planted the seeds for it. But then, from Fall Brawl, they planned the whole thing where Sting was going to be the ultimate guy to take down the NWO. And they built and built. This was a really well-nurtured angle, the way they built this. Because NWO kept trying to go for Sting, and pretty much from about right after Fall Brawl 96, till just after Uncensored 97, where Sting had shown up and it was a big brawl, and it was Team NWO, Team WCW, and stuff like that, and it was a big, I think it was a big battle royal, a big tag match. I think it was a big battle royal. Some of those matches blend together for me. I did an uncensored series on the, on the various pay-per-views they did, which you guys can go check that out and hear my thoughts on it. But for this, like, Sting showed up and showed his allegiance to WCW and beat up the NWO and this kind of stuff. The next night is where they really finally kicked off the whole thing with him and Hogan, because he had pointed Hogan at the pay-per-view. Then they showed on pay-per-view, or they showed on Nitro. Did almost kind of the same thing. Tag match, I think it was the Steiners and Harlem Heat. I think it was, and then the NWO runs down, and Luger and the Giant run down, and, to help defend WCW, and everybody, NWO gets out of the ring, and I get goosebumps just thinking about it, but you had Team WCW, or, WCW talent standing in the ring, and then all of a sudden this, like, puff of smoke and everything, this, like, pyro goes off, and Sting just descends down from the rafters. The crowd freaking erupts, and he has a little bit of difficulty taking off the, the cable and everything. But everybody's cheering. He stands up on the I think it was like second rope, and just points that baseball. I mean, I don't have a baseball bat, but just points that baseball bat right at Hogan. And of course, he's saying, he's looking at me, so he's freaking out and everything. And from right there, they nurtured and built that, and the confrontation where he would take down members of the NWO and everything, and you would have this build, and this great build and everything, and he's built it up, even with Hogan losing to Lex Luger on the August 4th, 1997 edition of Nitro, losing the title, and then waiting back at Road Wild just a few days later. It didn't interrupt the whole flow. Because if they hadn't done that, the thing is Hogan actually probably would have had the title for about 16 months at that point, because he won at Road Wild 96. So it would have actually been longer, or would have been just about as long as his title reign, where he won at Bash at the Beach 94 and then lost it at Halloween Havoc. In fact, actually would have been just about a month longer. But going to this match, the build, and like I said, tremendous undercard and everything. I mean, there were some matches that weren't all that good, and you had Steve McMichael wrestling, which was unfortunate that the name Steve McMichael was associated with Starrcade, because he was a dog shit wrestler. Kind of fitting, considering the little dog Pepe was moreover and probably a better talker than him. Because whatever McMichael said, it wasn't English. He was like Booker T, just with more head trauma and whiter and stupider, because at least Booker T was an amazing athlete. But the whole thing of, like, when they opened the show, they opened the pay-per-view, to the build of it, they had WCW talents throughout the seed in the arena, Ultimo Dragon, a few others and stuff like that. If the NWO was going to try any of this kind of stuff, and Hogan comes down, it's big entrance and everything. And then they had this weird screen thing where they were using these laser lights and, having a Sting graphic and this kind of stuff, and this narration, which I'm not going to try to repeat the whole thing, but it's like, from the ashes rises a beacon of hope, a dark warrior, with a vision of truth, or to give us truth, and, with a vision for justice. This is Sting. I mean, I can't remember all the stuff. You watch the entrance, you'll understand, but the bottom line, a big entrance. He goes around the Starrcade logo to make his entrance, crowd explodes, pop, 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 this pyro and everything is going, and this video's taking a bit, but it's building up to stuff, because I was excited for this match. I watched it at a friend's house. I was excited for this, and I watched pay-per-view live. It was one of the first WCW pay-per-views I vividly remember watching live. Even though I had a friend who had a neighbor friend whose uncle ordered the pay-per-views, I wasn't always able to watch them live, but a lot of times he would tape them because of school and stuff like this. But I had to see this match, so I was hyped up and everything. Me and my friend was hyped up. We were WCW fans. His mom was really nice and everything, and let us have the living room. They all went out and did some stuff, and because they didn't really care for wrestling, but they appreciated it. They appreciated our passion for it. So we're sitting there watching. Sting does a big thing. If you know the backstory of like Sting maybe not being in the gym that much and maybe not being as dedicated, okay, it's that kind of stuff. And the more you learn about it, the more you kind of realize that this thing was doomed with the way they were booking it. And they had Bret Hart as a special guest enforcer, special guest outside enforcer. That was the best he could do. Now, if I remember right, he could appear on TV and pay-per-view, but he couldn't wrestle until January, which fit. I mean, if that's the case with a WWE contract, like, a no-compete clause, but he could be on TV, then okay. I get why he was a special guest referee, but then you had Sting and Hogan. Big build. Sting hit a few moves, but Hogan mainly dominated the whole damn match. It was a typical 80s, early 90s Hogan match. Boom, boom. He finally hits the leg drop. Hogan does. And Nick Patrick is supposed to go 1, 2, 3. Screw job. Because the screw job had just happened a month and a half before. And Bret was going to say, no, not that way. But Nick Patrick... So, instead of doing that, he screwed up the count. Sting lost clean. Bret stopped the referee, or the timekeeper from ringing the bell. And was like, not that way. Bret still went along with the damn script, even though everybody's watching it. I'm watching at home. The crowd's watching. They're like, was this supposed to happen? What the fuck? And Bret's like, that was a Bret. God, what Nick Patrick gets out there. And I'm not going to blame Nick Patrick, but it's just, that was Bret's, that was a fast count. Oh no, it wasn't, sir. He knocks Nick Patrick out, Bret does. He goes to get Hogan, who had just won and retained his championship clean. So Hogan hadn't, as far as I remember the match, Hogan hadn't cheated. And even if he had used a chair on the outside or any of that stuff, the bottom line is, Hogan hadn't cheated at the finish. 1, 2, 3. Or 1, 2, 3. The whole point. It was clean. Bret grabs Hogan by what hair Hogan had remained in 97. Threw him back in the ring. Restarted the match. Sting hits the splash. Hits a couple moves. Hits the splash. Hits another splash, I think he hit one. But again, the whole finish is just messy. The crowd erupts, but you had, Bret, of course, was like down there or whatever. Hogan was in the Scorpion Deathlock, and Hogan says yes, so Sting wins the championship in a restarted match. The talents come down, Giant Luger, various people. Come down and celebrate with Sting. Like he had won it for WCW. Larry Zbyszko beat Eric Bischoff earlier. So actually Zbyszko, WCW had control of the company again. So it's like, this big whole thing and this build and whatever. And it was the beginning of the end for WCW. Because they took what was an incredible amount of buy rates for that pay-per-view. An incredible amount of buy rates. And they deflated the balloon. That was it. Now, business was still really, really hot in WCW. They were making money. The whole thing with Goldberg and a lot of that stuff was still making money in 98. But they had built that up. And what happened was one of the worst finishes on the face of the planet. The worst way. It made Sting look stupid. It made Bret look stupid. It made Hogan seem, even though Hogan was the heel, like, wait a second, I got screwed over when I won clean. And then they did a funky finish the next night on Nitro, and I will try to watch the December 29th, 1997 Raw and Nitros and do a 20-year reflection on those couple episodes if I get the time. I don't know if I will. But they did a confusing finish at the end where Hogan held the tights, and so he won the title, but then the title got held up and wasn't defended as Sold Out 98 and was going to be built in this big match at Super Bowl 98, which was in February. So essentially what you're telling the pay-per-view paying customers that bought into this big build that you did for Starrcade 97 and for Hogan and Sting is that they got your damn money, and this big build for this gigantic show was just to further an angle. It wasn't going to be the blow off for an angle. It wasn't going to be the big crescendo. I'm not saying the Sting and Hogan shouldn't have wrestled after this. I'm not saying that. But the fact that Sting wasn't champion for more than 24 hours after this pay-per-view was ridiculous. And the bungled finish and the stupid shit. And Hogan, I mean, I'm sorry. If Hogan did not play his creative control card here, then I would be surprised. I would say I would eat my hat, except I only own one, little Christmassy hat. And I'm not eating that. But I just don't understand how WCW could have screwed this up, because the build was perfect. Whether WCW management and whatever knew what the hell they were doing, they got this right. The build and everything right. And they fucked it all up. And it's one of the biggest fuck-ups that I've seen in wrestling. And especially considering the build they had. The build, the big stars. I mean, this was a match people had to see. And it was just a further something that got blown up, that got put on Nitro, and then got put on Super Brawl 8, and no one fucking cared by that point. No one cared. Sting had a very mundane 2-month run as champion. And then Savage beat him. I think Savage beat him. And Savage lost the title a day later to Hogan, who then dropped it to Goldberg a little bit later, and then they messed up Goldberg, but I'll do the Starrcade 98 Nash and Goldberg reflection this time next year, provided that, of course, I'm not, I don't collapse, which I doubt I will, but that's a whole nother finish that I could talk about. But it's like, and I know it's a bit of a long show, but it's just, I've never understood how WCW could have screwed that up. I will never understand how this company did that. They had such a great build and fucked it all over. And they shat all over the fans. And that wasn't the end of them shitting on the fans. I'm not saying WWE didn't do that with their pay-per-views. And I'm not saying the all pay-per-views should be like, the finale. Obviously, some pay-per-views you build a 3-4 match series or something like that, or 5-match series. You get my point. Triple H and Rock had a great series in 98 and in 2000 on pay-per-view. Also 98, 99, but also 98 and 2000. But the whole point is, with this, the big show, Starrcade was still seen as the premier pay-per-view for WCW. And that end made it to where even though people would tune in after that, the air was already mostly out of the balloon. And then they just let everything out of the balloon and just, it crashed right down to earth at Starrcade 98 and the Finger Poke of Doom about a week later. It was fucking embarrassing. Anyway, that's what I got to say about Starrcade 1997, the main event, Sting versus Hulk Hogan, Bret Hart's special guest referee. Yeah, made Bret look really stupid. Anyway, what did you guys think? What did you guys think of the match? I mean, whether you were a fan at the time, whether you weren't old enough to appreciate it but watched it back, what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Let me know on Twitter. My Twitter handle's in the description. Like, share, subscribe also. It's been Real Honesty with Jar Mifflin. I'm Jar Mifflin, and I will see you soon.